listeners to the Mindful Living podcast. I'm your host, Sana, as always, and this is your space for soulful conversations around conscious living, emotional wellness, and transformative growth. Now, today in this episode, we are exploring a deeply personal and powerful topic: self talk, the ongoing inner dialogue that can either nourish us or sabotage us. And joining me is a phenomenal guest, Rose Leopold. She's an authenticity and intimacy coach who helps men and women reconnect with their emotions and step into deeper self expression and connection. With a background in psychology, somatic healing, and holistic health, Rose brings a grounded, intuitive presence to emotional healing work. And listeners, Rose's story is raw, wild, and deeply inspiring. And today we'll be unpacking the power of our inner voices, our relationship with them, and how we can reprogram our thoughts for clarity, compassion, and confidence. So, with that, Rose, welcome to the show. And it is such an honor to have you with us today.
Thank you, Sana. Thank you for that amazing introduction.
Okay, so Rose, before we talk about the topic, I would love to. I guess all of us would love to know a bit about your journey. What brought you to this world of exploring the voices within us? Getting that clarity, that self talk, that self expression. If you can share.
Sure. Happy to. I'll do my best to keep it relatively brief so that we can focus on self-talk for most of the 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And and yeah, just to give you and listeners a sense of why I'm so passionate about sharing things like this with other people, but also to let people know that it does come from deep personal experience for me.
Hmm.
Um, when I was 15, shortly after I turned 15, I very quickly started experiencing very debilitating illness. At first, anxiety, depression, autoimmune disease, migraines, a bunch of symptoms that seemed to come out of nowhere and and spiraled and got worse and really consumed my life for the next 8 years. Many more diagnoses were added to that list. I was on over 4 dozen different medications during that time, in and out of hospitals. My life very much revolved around being sick. And oh, I'm sorry.
Please go ahead, Rose.
Yeah. Um, and for the most part during that time, I was turning to the conventional medical system or, modern medicine per se, for help. That's what my parents knew to do, was to take me, to my primary care physician, to psychiatrists, etc. And they were very, conventional in their approach.
Mhm.
And and after 7, 8 years, there was very little significant improvement, and in some ways things were getting worse. But I had met new people by that time that were offering me ideas like, well, like, you create your reality, um,
Yeah.
and and things like, talking to me about like neurolinguistic programming and the power of how we identify, for example, like me having this idea in my head that I am depressed or I have major depressive disorder, right? People were suggesting to me, maybe that's not the most empowering thing for you at this phase in your journey.
Mhm.
And there was so much else going on at that time, but essentially I started saying yes to the first little but growing trail of breadcrumbs that led me out of more conventional healthcare and into more alternative and holistic healthcare. So that included I started mindfulness practice that turned into meditation, various types of meditation. I created a yoga practice. It's deepened over time. I a lot of breath work, sound healing, psychedelic assisted therapy, things that were very, especially at first, very outside of the box, yet proved themselves as, much more positively impactful very quickly than had, that 8 years of hospitals and medications. So, yes, and, like, now I love serving as a voice to help, just help more people understand these things, hear about them, and understand how to apply them to their own lives. And that comes from a place of like, this stuff changed my life, right? Like, at the point where I was considering at 21 years old going on disability because I couldn't hold down a job because things were just that bad, right? Like, now I've run my own businesses for 5 years. um, I like just things are so incredibly different because I started employing, you know, mindsets and methods like things as simple as noticing my self-talk.
That is so, so inspiring, Rose. So inspiring. And what was going within my mind when I, you know, was hearing your story is, first of all, 15, that age, when it's our most, it's the preteens and teens. That is the age when we get to have the outer world experiences. It's a very impressionable age. And at that time, I just want to ask you, Rose, when you um, um, got to know about all this, you were experiencing this, what was going within your mind? I mean, what kind of self talk you were having? Or maybe you were completely blank, you were completely in dark, and you didn't have any idea what to do.
I definitely wasn't as aware, of my self-talk at the time, like, just even that concept of, like, "Oh,
Mm.
the voices inside my head are, like, separate from who I am," right? Like, that in and of itself was revolutionary when I learned it years later. There was a lot of blankness. There was a lot of desperation of kind of holding on to these stories that doctors and therapists told me. Uh, Basically, the story being, you know, you're sick. There's nothing like wrong with you per se. Like, this isn't your fault, right? Like, you didn't do something wrong, but you're probably going to be dealing with this the rest of your life. And what we can do to help you manage it is to figure out the right kind of cocktail of medications. That was the framework that I was clinging to for 7, 8 years, because that was the hope, right? Like, was we just have to figure out what pharmaceuticals will fix me, and then I'll be able to, like, go back to living the productive, creative life that I was used to living prior to that phase.
Mm. Well, thank you so much, Rose, for sharing your story. Thank you so much. Definitely requires a great deal of courage and vulnerability. And I really, really, I'm really inspired by what you are doing for others out there. Let's talk about self-talk or the inner voice. So, how do you help people become aware of their inner self-talk in the first place?
Yeah, it's definitely a process, right? Like, for a lot of people, just again, having that suggestion that, like, "Oh, the thoughts in my head are separate from who I am," in the sense that, like, I have the ability to control and influence them, that can be pretty radical. And the foremost suggestion that I give to anyone client or otherwise, is that they start giving themselves time and space to slow down in a low stimulation place, as much as they can handle. So some of us, especially when we first start going through this process, we have a hard time in low stimulation places, because we tend to become that much more acutely aware of our inner experience. But as much as we can for whatever, point we're at in our journey, leaning into being in silence, leaning into being, in a darker place, a quieter place, and just starting to practice being aware of the thoughts that come up when we're not busy doing something, right? So most of us are consumed moment to moment with, I'm doing something now and I'm already thinking about the next thing I need to do, and I probably have a list going on in my head of all the rest of the things to do today and tomorrow and this week and this year, right? We're very consumed often in the doing. So giving time to sit, or even walk, right? So again, some people, depending on your experience with trauma, it might be hard to be still, to be in a still position. But finding a way to give yourself particularly more silence, so maybe that's just going out in nature for a walk and noticing, just starting to practice. It's a practice, right? And it just like any practice, it will change and evolve and improve over time. Just starting to practice noticing what comes up in my mind when I'm not involved in doing something. And then over time, starting to notice what are the themes there. So, and we can even name them, right? In A Path with Heart by Jack Kornfield, a relatively famous meditation teacher in the United States, Buddhist meditation teacher. He talks about naming, like giving kind of fun, playful names to the archetypes or personas, right, that we start to notice in our mind, right? So maybe I start to notice, like, for me, one of the names, one of the personas that I have identified and noticed and played with is Judgmental Janet. Um, and, it and it feels, potent to mention here that a big part of the reason that we aren't aware of these things that are in our subconscious, but really need more space to come forward, is
Mhm.
because they are uncomfortable, right? So continuing on with Judgmental Janet, I grew up as a person that was perceived and taught to be very sweet, very nice,
Mhm.
kind, right? So that judgment in me got pushed way to the back because I didn't, that wasn't me. That wasn't Rose. That's not sweet. That's not nice, right? But ultimately, when we don't acknowledge and accept and integrate those parts of ourselves, whether it's judgment, anger, loneliness, depression, um, jealousy, etc., well, one, we're putting a lot of effort, where it requires a lot of energy just to push away those things and keep them repressed. And two, we're missing out on the beautiful gifts that each of those parts of us have for us if we would just welcome them into the fold, see them fully, love them, and integrate them, give them a job to do. Right? So Janet may be judgmental, but she's also how I keep really high standards. She's how I maintain my integrity. Yeah. But I wasn't really able to use her for that until I got to know her and let her in, right?
Wow, that is really, really creative. And I also want to ask you, Rose, so with the current context, and this, this is coming from my own experiences as well. Sometimes we or oftentimes we try to suppress our inner voice because we have that kind of fear that he or she will ask us to go into that vicious loop and into that feeling of being judgmental, or having that sense of, oh, you did that thing wrong 5 years back, and this is the reason that you're feeling kind of ashamed, or you're feeling that guilt, or you're feeling frustrated with whatever is happening with you. It's because of you. We don't want to face, or get to hear that inner voice, and we try to keep ourselves busy with something. It can be kind of, getting into, looking into our phones, and do kind of a doom scrolling and just killing our time, because we don't want to be alone and get to listen to our inner voice. So what's your approach on how to tackle this, or how to navigate through these kind of situations when we actually intend to get to know our inner voice?
Mhm, mhm. So, I'll speak to 2 sides of the same coin, 2 ways that I recommend approaching that situation, and then I also want to drop deeper to speaking about the often necessary somatic reprogramming that needs to occur in order for mental reprogramming to really sink in, and integrate. So, the 2 sides of that coin, one side is one side's more masculine, one side's more feminine. They're both, I would say, necessary for every individual, on our path, on our growth journey, on our healing journey, on our self-actualization path. So one side, the more masculine side being setting boundaries. So really like strengthening the part of our mind that has the self-compassion and self-respect and self-worth to put a hard stop, um, in front of those thoughts when they come in. And some level of that is discipline too, and just a practice. I'll use visualizations with my clients, like, build your superhero, the superhero version of you strong enough to jump in front of the train as it's going right, and 100 miles an hour and stop it in its tracks. Like that's the kind of force, that over time, right? It's a practice that we can build up to just say, or the visualization I will use, or the technique I will use when I hear those self-judgment voices coming in is, no, like you can go to voicemail. Like I don't have time for you. Like, you're actually, I realize that you, are well-meaning, but that doesn't mean that you're actually good for me, or that this is a constructive conversation, and you're gonna go to voicemail now. Um, so that's one side, is the more, like, masculine approach, setting boundaries with ourselves, with our thoughts. The other side, the more feminine approach, is building a greater muscle of self-compassion. um Compassion is really the biggest thing, I think, but also another side of that is humor and lightheartedness, and an ability to not take those voices so seriously, and to find a way to kind of laugh at whatever irony, or however we can make it funny, like, even if it's just like, "Oh my gosh, you keep saying the same thing over and over, like, wow, like, don't you have anything more creative to say?" Right? Like, just finding a way to bring lightness to that space, whether through self-compassion or humor, will dissolve that self-judgment, and the perfectionism, and why aren't you better yet, and shame, and analyze yourself better, and all that. It will dissolve it so fast. Um,
Wow. Oh, I'm loving this. It's almost like, I think, anyone can interpret the relationship, but what I feel, it's like either we are kind of that best friend or BFF with our inner voice, exploring the masculine and the feminine side. But really, really, it's kind of a very nuanced relationship with our inner voice.
it is, and there's a lot to be said for experimenting and seeing what works for you, especially if, and especially just asking the question, how have I been responding to this voice? Like if we're noticing that if the first noticing is, wow, this isn't working, I can't seem to like find neutrality or peace with this voice, then, the second noticing might be, how have I been trying to relate to this voice? Because that, you know, at least how I've been doing it for however long I have been is apparently not working or not working anymore. So then that invites in space for more curiosity and creativity for, okay, well, how else can I relate to that voice?
I agree. I agree. That is really, really exciting, Rose. Okay.
I do.
Also,
uh,
mhm,
I do just really quick, son, also want to because, this was really important for me to remember on my journey, and I'm sure it will, I hope it will, like, provide some relief to other people,
mm,
um, that we can only really let new mental programming in to the depth that our body, that our nervous system will allow, that it's, like, ready to receive. So
mhm,
just like examples from my own life, I had a much more dedicated meditation, mindfulness, positive affirmations, mantra practice prior to the depth of my yoga practice, breathwork practice, etc. And I kept
mhm,
running into this wall where it was like I'm telling myself these things, but they just can't seem to they just don't seem to stick. They don't seem to really sink in to the depth that I want them to. And I had an old coach point me to a book, um, and I didn't read the book. He just like told me the summary of this book that was basically research on uh, the title was something like "When Positive Affirmations Stop Working," right? And the gist of it is that if our nervous system isn't open and receptive and able to receive that new mental programming, it doesn't we can listen to positive affirmations for 5 hours a day. It's not going to do anything. So that's why it is, especially for people who have experienced any level of trauma, it is particularly important for us to pair mental reprogramming with somatic reprogramming through yoga, through pranayama, breath work, any kind of somatic practice. Tai Chi, basic tantric practices can be helpful.
mhm,
Things like massage and working out can be, like, partially helpful, but really something we want something that's, like, fully holistically engaging the mind,
mhm,
the body, and the emotions. Um, which so I would just say yoga as a go-to for that. And so for anyone who's listening who finds themselves running into a block with their, mental reprogramming process, if you're not already doing some kind of somatic practice, it's quite possible that your body just doesn't know how to receive and integrate in all of the great new information that you're trying to give it through your mind. And so helping the body along it through an intentional, um, strength building, but also relaxing and regulating process like yoga, can be really helpful for helping it become more receptive to those new ideas.
That's really, really such a great, I guess, some of the practical tools or channels to start with those. And of course, if our listeners would like to connect with you further to get more wisdom on this, how to start with becoming aware about our inner voice, what's the best way to do that?
They can reach out to me through a couple of ways through my website, which is www.naturallyrosie, that's ROSEY so NATURALLYROSEY or through my Substack, which is which is Naturally Rosie on Substack. Substack is where I publish a lot of writing as well as my podcast, and
Oh.
whereas my website is more specific to coaching clients and group coaching. But people can reach out to me through either. And really, if you are just looking for more insightful, uh, insightful writing and insightful speech, my Substack is a really great resource for all kinds of holistic health, tips and tricks, as well as just learning more about my journey. I have found that when we share our stories vulnerably, like from a place of empowerment, that just having other just witnessing someone else in that vulnerable empowerment can be really, soothing and healing for our nervous systems.
Couldn't agree more with you, Rose. Beautifully put up. And I'll ensure to have all the links mentioned in the show notes. And Rose, thank you so much for your wisdom, for sharing your journey, and of course your beautiful way of making this work feel both soulful and grounded. Thank you
Mm,
so much.
thank you, Sana.
And to all of my beautiful listeners out there, if there's one thing to take away from today, it is this: you are not your thoughts. You can witness them, question them, and most importantly, rewrite them. And if this episode resonated with you, be sure to connect with Rose and follow her on her Substack, Naturally Rosie, and listen to her podcast and check out her coaching work. I'll have all the links mentioned in the show notes for you. And as always, thank you to all of you for tuning into the Mindful Living. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and keep speaking to yourself with love and compassion. Thank you.